careful what you wish for. Get set. Do you ever feel that the people around you are leading a more comfortable and enjoyable life than you are? Have you ever wished to lead a life similar to that of your favorite celebrity? We often imagine that such a life is a great joy, but we fail to realize that there are so many difficulties in other people's lives too. Read this poem about Arnie the apple, who wished to be picked by the apple pickers.
Arnie the apple hung from a tree in an orchard a mile wide, and every day the pickers would come and haul dozens of apples inside. They'd pick the prettiest of the bunch, filling their baskets and pails. But they always passed by Arnie, ignoring his whines and wails. "Please pick me," Arnie would cry each time the pickers sauntered by. "I want to go inside with you," cried Arnie till he turned bright blue. But the pickers ignored him day after day, while Arnie hung there in dismay, trying to nurse his shattered pride, dying to be picked, to be taken inside. Each new dawn he'd do a trick, like spinning around on his twig, but the picky pickers never stopped for apple that weren't big, or juicy, or red, or bright, or sweet. Poor Arnie was none of these things. He wasn't completely quite full grown, and he had some nicks and dings. He dreamed what it was like inside, lights and music all around. Arnie just wanted to go there so badly, he flung himself to the ground. The next day, the pickers came along and saw him lying there. They took him inside, and Arnie thought, "This is it. I am finally there." But when Arnie the apple looked around, he realized his dreams were false, because in less than 15 minutes, he was Arnie Applesauce.
Word meanings: haul, carry, transport, whines and wails, long high-pitched sounds which express sorrow. Sauntered, walked slowly and casually, nicks and dings, small cuts or bruises. Anne's story. The Diary of a Young Girl was written over the course of the 2 years when its author, a young Jewish girl named Anne Frank, was hiding from the Nazis with her family in a safe house in Amsterdam. While the Nazis were arresting Jews and transporting them to death camps, the Franks tried to wait out the war in a secret attic, able to survive only because helpers brought them food and books over the course of their time there. Anne aspired to be a writer and chronicled the details of life in hiding from her own perspective. In 1944, the family was betrayed, arrested, and eventually sent to concentration camps, where they all perished, except for Anne's father, Otto. Thursday, 9 July 1942. Dearest Kitty, it was agreed that we'd go into hiding this week. The hiding place was located in Father's office building. Saturday, 11 July 1942. Dearest Kitty, Father, Mummy and Margot still can't get used to the sound of the Wester Toren clock, which tells us the time every quarter of an hour. Not me. I loved it from the start. It sounds so reassuring, especially at night. You no doubt want to hear what I think of being in hiding. Well, all I can say is that I don't really know yet. I don't think I'll ever feel at home in this house, but that doesn't mean I hate it. It's more like being on holiday in some strange pension. Kind of an odd way to look at life in hiding, but that's how things are. The annex is an ideal place to hide in. It may be damp and lopsided, but there's probably not a more comfortable hiding place in all of Amsterdam. No, in all of Holland. Up until now, our bedroom with its blank walls was very bare, thanks to Father, who brought my entire postcard collection and film star collection here beforehand. and with a brush and a pot of glue, I was able to plaster the walls with pictures. It looks much more cheerful now. When the Van Daans arrive, we'll be able to build cupboards and other odds and ends out of the wood piled in the attic. Margaret and Mother have recovered somewhat. Yesterday, Mother felt well enough to cook split pea soup for the first time. But then she was downstairs talking and forgot all about it. The peas were scorched black, and no amount of scraping could get them out of the pan. Last night the 4 of us went down to the private office and listened to England on the wireless. I was so scared someone might hear it that I literally begged Father to take me back upstairs. Mother understood my anxiety and went with me. Whatever we do, we are very afraid the neighbours might hear or see us. We started off immediately the first day with sewing curtains. Actually, you can hardly call them that, since they're nothing but scraps of fabric, varying greatly in shape, quality and pattern, which Father and I stitched crookedly together. These works of art were tacked to the windows, where they'll stay until we come out of hiding. The building on our right is a branch of the Keg Company, a firm from Zaandam, and on the left is a furniture workshop, though the people who work there are not on the premises after working hours. Any sound we make might travel through the walls. We've forbidden Margaret to cough at night, even though she has a bad cold, and we are giving her large doses of codeine. I am looking forward to the arrival of the Van Daans, which is set for Tuesday. It will be much more fun and also not as quiet. You see, it's the silence that makes me so nervous during the evenings and nights, and I'd give anything to have one of our helpers sleep here. It's really not that bad here, since we can do our own cooking and can listen to the wireless in Daddy's office. Mr. Kleinman and Miep and Pep Bosquid too have helped us so much. We've already preserved loads of rhubarb, strawberries and cherries, so for the time being I doubt if we'll get bored. We also have a supply of reading material, and we're going to buy lots of games. Of course, we can't ever look out of the window or go outside. And we have to be quiet so that people downstairs can't hear us. Yesterday we had our hands full. We had to preserve 2 crates of cherries for Mr. Kugler. We're going to use the empty crates to make bookshelves. Someone's calling me. Yours, Anne. Friday, 21 August 1942. Dearest Kitty, now our secret annex has truly become secret. Because so many houses are being searched, Mr. Kugler thought it would be better to have a bookcase built in front of the entrance to our hiding place. It swings out on its hinges and opens like a door. Mr. Bosquill did the carpentry work. Mr. Bosquill has been told that the 7 of us are in hiding, and he's been most helpful. Now, whenever we want to go downstairs, we have to duck and then jump. After the first 3 days, we were all walking around with bumps on our foreheads from banging our heads against the low doorway. Then Van Daan cushioned it by nailing a towel stuffed with wood shavings to the doorframe. Let's see if it helps. I'm not doing much schoolwork. I've given myself a holiday until September. Father wants to start giving me lessons then, but we have to buy all the books first. Our lives are changed. Peter's hair was washed today, but that's nothing special. Mr. Van Daan and I are always arguing. Mummy always treats me like a baby, which I can't stand. For the rest, things are going better. I don't think Peter's got any nicer. He's an obnoxious boy who lies around on his bed all day, only rousing himself to do a little carpentry work before returning to his nap. What a clot! It's a beautiful day outside, nice and hot, and in spite of everything, we make most of the weather by lounging on the folding bed in the attic. Yours, Anne. Monday, 21 September 1942. Dearest Kitty, today I'll tell you the general news here in the annex. A lamp has been mounted above my divan bed so that in future if I get scared at night, I'll be able to pull a cord and switch on the light. I can't use it at the moment because we're keeping our window open a little day and night. The Van Daans have built a very handy wood-stained food safe. Till now, this cupboard was in Peter's room, but in the interest of fresh air, it's been moved to the attic. In its place, there's a shelf. I advised Peter to put his table underneath the shelf, add a rug, and place his cupboard where the table now stands. This might make his cubbyhole comfortable, though I wouldn't like to sleep there. There's something happening every day. But I'm too tired and lazy to write it all down. Yours, Anne. In 1944, the secret annex was discovered. The 8 people living there were taken to the prison camp, Auschwitz, Poland, and finally to a camp in Germany. Anne died of typhus here at the age of 15. After the war, the diary was recovered by her father, Otto Frank. It has been published in over 60 languages all over the world. Word meanings. Westertoren, name of a church in Amsterdam. Pension, a small hotel or hostel. Annex, an extra building added to the original, lopsided, leaning to one side. Split pea soup, a soup made of dry, split peas. Tacked, fixed with tacks, nails. Codeine, a medicine used for pain relief. Rhubarb, a plant used to make jam. Duck, bend down. Obnoxious, unpleasant or annoying. Clot, an annoying person. Cubbyhole, tiny space. The last lesson. Get set. Have you ever thought how you would feel if you were to leave your present school? You would miss your friends and teachers. Read a story about the feelings of a boy when he comes to know that one of his teachers is leaving the school. I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of a scolding, especially because M. Hamel had said that he would question us on participles, and I did not know the first word about them. For a moment I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles. But I had the strength to resist, and hurried off to school. When I passed the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. The lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer, and I thought to myself, without stopping,
What can be the matter now?
Then I hurried by as fast as I could go. Usually when school began there was a great bustle, which could be heard out in the street, opening and closing of desks, lessons repeated in unison, very loud with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. But now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen, but I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. But nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly,
Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you.
I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me the most was to see, on the back benches that were always empty, the village people sitting quietly like ourselves, Everybody looked sad. While I was wondering about it all, M. Hamel mounted his chair, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, said,
My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive.
What a thunderclap these words were to me! Oh, the wretches! That was what they had put up at the town hall. My last French lesson. Why, I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there, then. Oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs or going sliding on the Saar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry. My grammar and my history of the saints were old friends now that I couldn't give up. And M. Hamel, too. The idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Poor man! It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes. And now I understood why the old men of the village were sitting there at the back of the room. It was because they were sorry, too, that they had not gone to school any more. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear, and without one mistake. But I got mixed up on the first words and stood there, holding on to my desk, my heart beating, and not daring to look up. I heard M. Hamel saying to me,
I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, Bah, I have plenty of time. I'll learn it tomorrow.
And now you see where we've come out. Ah, that's the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you,
How is it? You pretend to be Frenchmen, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language.
But you are not the worst. Poor little Franz. We've all a great deal to reproach ourselves with.
Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills, so as to have a little more money. And I have been to put blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday?
Then, from one thing to another, Monsieur Hamel went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it, because when people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar book and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy. I think, too, that I had never listened more carefully, and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. After the grammar we had a lesson in writing. That day, Monsieur Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work, and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself,
"Will they make them sing the German, even the pigeons?"
Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw Monsieur Hamel sitting motionless in his chair, and gazing first at one thing, then at another. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country the next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. All at once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment the trumpets of the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our windows. Monsieur Hamel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall.
"My friends," said he, I... But something choked him. He could not go on.
Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and, bearing down with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, "Vive la France!" Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand.
"School is dismissed. You may go."
Word meanings. Prussian, belonging to Prussia, a part of modern-day Germany. Tempting, appealing to or attracting someone, even if it is wrong or unwise. Draft, an order to join the armed forces. Bustle, excited and noisy activity. Unison, all together, at the same time. Commotion, a disturbance, usually noisy. Reproach, blame. Angelus, a Christian prayer. Vive la France, long live France, in French. You are old, Father William. Get set. Here is a poem from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, a popular book written by Lewis Carroll. This poem is a parody of another English poem, The Old Man's Comforts, by Robert Southey.
"You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think, at your age, it is right?" "In my youth," Father William replied to his son, "I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I am perfectly sure I have none, why I do it again and again." "You are old," said the youth, "as I mentioned before, and you have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that?" "In my youth," said the sage, as he shook his grey locks, "I kept all my limbs very supple. By the use of this ointment, 1 shilling a box, allow me to sell you a couple." "You are old," said the youth, "and your jaws are too weak for anything together than suet. Yet you finished the goose, with the bones and the beak. How did you manage to do it?" "Ah, my youth," said his father, "I took to the law, and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life." "You are old," said the youth. "One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever. Yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever?" "I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough," said his father. "Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs."
Word meanings. Incessantly, without interruption, constantly. Locks, a small number of hairs on your head that grow and hang together. Supple, flexible. Shilling, old British currency. Suit, the hard white fat of animals used to make foods such as puddings, pastry and mincemeat. Don't give yourself airs. Don't have a haughty and proud behavior. The Kite Maker. Get set. Ruskin Bond, an Indian author of British descent, is considered to be an idol among Indian writers. His adaptable, original and graceful writing style has positioned him among the most triumphant Indian short story writers. Here is one of his most famous stories, The Kite Maker, where he laments the loss of appreciation for the art of kite making. There was but one tree in the street known as Gully Ramnathan, an ancient banyan that had grown through the cracks of an abandoned mosque, and little Ali's kite had got caught in its branches. The boy, barefoot and clad only in a torn shirt, ran along the cobbled stones of the narrow street to where his grandfather sat, nodding dreamily in the sunshine of their back courtyard.
"Grandfather,"
shouted the boy,
"my kite has gone."
The old man woke from his daydream with a start, and raising his head, displayed a beard that would have been white had it not been dyed red with mehendi leaves.
"Did the twine break?"
he asked.
"I know that kite twine is not what it used to be." "No, grandfather, the kite is stuck in the banyan tree."
The old man chuckled.
You have yet to learn how to fly a kite properly, my child, and I am too old to teach you. That's the pity of it. But you shall have another.
He had just finished making a new kite from bamboo paper and thin silk, and it lay in the sun, burning up. It was a pale pink kite with a small green tail. The old man handed it to Ali, and the boy raised himself on his toes and kissed his grandfather's hollowed-out cheek.
"I will not lose this one,"
he said.
"This kite will fly like a bird."
And he turned on his heels and skipped out of the courtyard. The old man remained dreaming in the sun. His kite shop was gone, the premises long since sold to a junk dealer, but he still made kites for his own amusement and for the benefit of his grandson Ali. Not many people bought kites these days. Adults disdained them, and children preferred to spend their money at the cinema. Moreover, there were not many open spaces left for the flying of kites. The city had swallowed up the open grassland that had stretched from the old fort's walls to the river bank. But the old man remembered a time when grown men flew kites and great battles were fought. The kites swerving and swooping in the sky, tangling with each other until the string of one was severed. Then the defeated but liberated kite would float away into the blue unknown. Kite flying was then the sport of kings, and the old man remembered how the Nawab himself would come down to the riverside with his retinue to participate in this noble pastime. There was time then to spend an idle hour with a gay dancing strip of paper. Now everyone hurried in a heat of hope, and delicate things like kites and daydreams were trampled underfoot. He, Mahmud, the kite maker, had in the prime of his life been well known throughout the city. Some of his more elaborate kites once sold for as much as 3 or 4 rupees each. At the request of the Nawab, he had once made a very special kind of kite, unlike any that had been seen in the district. It consisted of a series of small, very light paper discs trailing on a thin bamboo frame. To the end of each disc, he fixed a spring of grass, forming a balance on both sides. The surface of the foremost disc was slightly convex, and a fantastic face was painted on it, having 2 eyes made of small mirrors. The discs, decreasing in size from head to tail, assumed an undulatory form, and gave the kite the appearance of a crawling serpent. It required great skill to raise this cumbersome device from the ground, and only Mahmud could manage it. Everyone had heard of the dragon kite that Mahmud had made, and word went round that it possessed supernatural powers. A large crowd assembled in the open to watch its first public launching in the presence of the Nawab. At the first attempt, it refused to leave the ground. The discs made a plaintive, protesting sound, and the sun was trapped in the little mirrors, making the kite a living, complaining creature. Then the wind came from the right direction, and the dragon kite soared into the sky, wriggling its way higher and higher, the sun still glinting in its devil eyes. And when it went very high, it pulled fiercely on the twine, and Mahmud's young sons had to help him with the reel. Still the kite pulled, determined to be free, to break loose, to live a life of its own. And eventually it did so. The twine snapped. The kite leapt away towards the sun, sailing on heavenward, until it was lost to view. It was never found again, and Mahmud wondered afterwards if he made too vivid, too living a thing of the great kite. He did not make another like it. Instead, he presented to the Nawab a musical kite, one that made a sound like a violin when it rose in the air. Those were more leisurely, more spacious days. But the Nawab had died years ago, and his descendants were almost as poor as Mahmud himself. Kite makers, like poets, once had their patrons, but no one knew Mahmud simply because there were too many people in the gully, and they could not be bothered with their neighbors. When Mahmud was younger and had fallen sick, everyone in the neighborhood had come to ask about his health. But now, when his days were drawing to a close, no one visited him. Most of his old friends were dead, and his sons had grown up. One was working in a local garage, and the other, who was in Pakistan at the time of the partition, had not been able to rejoin his relatives. Both were taken for granted, permanent fixtures that were of no concern to the raucous, sweating mass of humanity that surrounded them. No longer did people gather under the banyan tree to discuss their problems and their plans. Only in the summer months did a few seek shelter from the fierce sun. But there was the boy, his grandson. It was good that Mahmud's son worked close by, for it gladdened the old man's heart to watch the small boy at play in the winter sunshine, growing under his eyes like a young and well-nourished sapling, putting forth new leaves every day. There is a great affinity between trees and men. We grow at much the same pace, if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures, and in our declining years we stoop a little. We remember, we stretch our brittle limbs in the sun, and then with a sigh, we shed our last leaves. Mahmud was like the banyan, his hands gnarled and twisted like the roots of the ancient tree. Ali was like the young mimosa planted at the end of the courtyard. In 2 years, both he and the tree would acquire the strength and confidence of their early youth. The voices in the street grew fainter, and Mahmud wondered if he was going to fall asleep and dream, as he so often did, of a kite so beautiful and powerful that it would resemble the great white bird of the Hindus, Garud, God Vishnu's famous steed. He would like to make a wonderful new kite for little Ali. He had nothing else to leave the boy. He heard Ali's voice in the distance, but he did not realize that the boy was calling him. The voice seemed to come from very far away. Ali was at the courtyard door asking if his mother had as yet returned from the bazaar. When Mahmud did not answer, the boy came forward, repeating his question. The sunlight was slanting across the old man's head, and a small white butterfly rested on his flowing beard. Mahmud was silent, and when Ali put his small brown hand on the old man's shoulder, he met with no response. the boy heard a faint sound, like the rubbing of marbles in his pocket. Suddenly afraid, Ali turned and moved to the door, and then ran down the street, shouting for his mother. The butterfly left the old man's beard and flew to the mimosa tree, and a sudden gust of wind caught the torn kite and lifted it in the air, carrying it far above the struggling city into the blind blue sky. Word meanings: abandoned, having been deserted or left; clad, dressed, covered; cobbled stone, any small stone rounded by the flow of water, essentially a large pebble; twine, strong thread or string consisting of 2 or more strands of hemp or cotton twisted together; premises, a house or building together with its land and outbuildings; disdained, considered to be unworthy of one's consideration; swerving, changing direction abruptly; severed, cut off, liberated, freed; retinue, a group of advisers, assistants, or others accompanying an important person; in the prime of his life, in the best years of one's life, when one is at the peak of one's powers; undulatory, moving in or resembling waves; cumbersome, large or heavy and therefore difficult to carry or use; plaintive, sounding sad and mournful; raucous, making or constituting a disturbingly harsh and loud noise; affinity, natural liking; resplendent, bright and fancy looking; gnarled, rough looking, full of knots, old. Pile's mischief. Get set. Have you ever been in trouble due to your mischief? Here is a story about Pile, who does something very mischievous and puts everyone into trouble because of it. Pile and her brother Sohail were young, lively children. They lived in a beautiful hill town. Everyone called him Dr. Sahib out of respect for his position. Their mother was devoted to them and full of patience, and she needed every bit of it, because her children often got into mischief, especially Pile. The children had 2 favorite pets, a German shepherd named Bosco, that followed Pile everywhere she went, and a small deer that lived in the barn. Pile was something of a tomboy and loved playing outdoors. She particularly liked the pool in the garden, where her father had taught the 2 children to swim. Her mother, however, wished she would be more docile and ladylike. One Sunday their father left the house early in the morning to go hunting. It was the season for wild ducks, and the nearby lake was full of them. The weather was beautiful, and their cousin, a boy of Sohail's age, was visiting them. So after breakfast, the children decided to play outside in the garden. They sat under one of the big shady trees and brought out some coloring books and a mechano set. Pile started coloring the picture of a bird, but you could tell she was really more interested in the toy building set. She kept watching what the boys were building and making suggestions for improvement. They had been playing only a short time when they heard a donkey bray loudly just outside the gate. This announced the arrival of the laundryman who came each Sunday morning with the family's clean laundry piled high on the back of his donkey. The children jumped up and raced to open the gate for him. Fat-bellied and bald, with large clumsy hands, the laundryman was a source of much amusement for the children. They loved to tease and make fun of him. As the donkey followed his master through the gate, Sohail turned to his sister.
"Go tell mother the laundryman is here."
"Go tell her yourself," answered Pile. "Can't you see I'm busy?" And to prove it, she went back to the bird in her coloring book.
"Oh, all right,"
said her brother. Sohail and his cousin went into the house, but they found that mother had gone to a neighbor's. So they went to look for her, leaving Pyle alone in the garden. Presently, bored with colouring, Pyle let the book fall on the ground and joined Bosco in his close observation of a squirrel playing on a nearby tree. Then she tried to get the waiting laundryman to talk to her, but he spoke such a funny dialect that the children always made fun of the way he talked. So he preferred keeping quiet. Soon he tied the donkey to one of the trees and carried his big bundle of clean laundry through the veranda into the house, looking about idly for something to do next. Pyle happened to catch sight of the donkey. Her eyes lit up with a flash. There was no one watching. Even the old gardener was out of sight, probably resting in the little tool shed. Quickly she untied the donkey and pulled it around to the backyard, intending to have a ride. But right then she heard her mother's voice. Alarmed, she looked for a place to hide the donkey. She realized that the laundryman would raise a big fuss searching for his animal. But then he would give up and go home. Then she told herself, "I'll have plenty of time to ride the donkey as much as I please." From his weekly visits to this house, the donkey was used to the children and their teasing ways. But today this charming little girl was acting so tenderly towards him that he thought she must be taking him to the barn to give him some of the delicious food they fed their pet stag. So he followed Pyle happily. Poor thing, little did he know what was in store for him. Pyle led him all around the grounds, but couldn't find a safe place to hide him. Time was running out. At any moment, someone might catch sight of her and the donkey. Just then, at the far end of the courtyard, she noticed the outside door to the guest bathroom. Yes, the donkey would be quite safe there. No one would ever think of looking for a donkey in the guest bathroom. Hurrying across the courtyard, she opened the door quietly, pushed the donkey inside, and quickly bolted the door from the outside. Then she ran back to the colouring book under the tree. The boys hadn't returned yet. She heaved a sigh of relief and, just as though nothing had happened, went on colouring the bird. How innocent she looked when they came back. Suddenly a scream rent the air. It was the laundryman who had just come out of the house with a big bundle of soiled clothes to take home and launder, and had found his donkey missing. Dropping the clothes on the veranda, he ran about in all directions, crying out for his dear donkey. But all his searching was in vain. Pyle, of course, swore she had no idea where the donkey was. She said she'd seen him break loose and go towards the forest, still screaming for his donkey. The laundryman went running off towards the forest. For a moment, peace returned to the house, but then an unexpected guest arrived. It was Mr. Ali, an old friend of their father, who stayed with them whenever he came visiting. He was a tall, thin man with a short grey beard, but no moustache, and he was going bald. What a scurrying about his arrival caused! He was received warmly by their mother and shown into the guest room, the one at the end of the courtyard. Pyle was becoming more and more nervous. As soon as she saw Mr. Ali arrive, she could smell trouble. But what could she do? On the one hand, her mother and the servants were in the guest room, busy making it ready for Mr. Ali, and on the other, she couldn't escape from Sohail and her cousin. All that was left then was to hope and pray Mr. Ali wouldn't go to the bathroom too soon, not until she'd had time to get the donkey out of it. As for the donkey, he sat peacefully in the corner of the dark bathroom, dreaming of the delicious meal he thought Pyle was bringing him. Now, Mr. Ali was a very tidy man. He always bathed twice a day, and today, after a tiring journey, he wanted a bath more than ever. So he took out clean clothes, changed his shoes for some wooden clogs, and made straight for the bathroom. He entered the small dark room by the inner door, the one from the bedroom and locked the door behind him. It was very dark, but he knew the arrangement of the room well and didn't bother about a light. He put his clean clothes on the stand and started towards the tub. But suddenly, through the gloom, he saw a sight he simply couldn't believe. Poor Mr. Ali! His heart all but stopped beating. Meanwhile, the donkey had continued daydreaming. When he heard voices in the next room, he told himself happily, they're getting my food ready." And then when the door opened, who should come in but a tall, scrawny fellow in wooden clogs. This was certainly no grass, no grain, no fodder. By now the donkey had simply had enough. At the sight of the bald Mr. Ali, the long-suffering beast lost all control and jumped to his feet, braying loudly. Now, in the darkness, Mr. Ali couldn't make out exactly what kind of animal it was that was threatening him. All he knew was that it was some huge, ugly creature letting out monstrous, strange cries. Completely unnerved, Mr. Ali yelled for help. Leaving his clogs behind, he ran for the door, but in his confusion, he went to the door Pyle had bolted from the outside. Struggle as he did, he simply couldn't open the door. How in the world could it be bolted from the outside when he had just bolted it from the inside? His worst fears were confirmed. Surely there was some jinni or ghost at work. The sound of Mr. Ali's shrieks and the donkey's frantic braying brought everyone running from all directions, the mother and the children and all the servants. What on earth could be the matter with Mr. Ali? Only Pyle knew what the trouble in the bathroom was. Mr. Ali felt sure it was a wolf that was attacking him. He heard a bucket roll over with a clang. Next, the wash jug came flying at him. Not an ordinary wolf for certain, but some monster of an evil spirit. Jumping over another bucket, he was trying to dodge his attacker, and he kept yelling and screaming for help at the top of his voice. The servants were in the bedroom trying to break down the door, and Mother was standing just outside, wringing her hands. Bosco came running up, barking loudly. For once Mother did not tell him to be quiet, but said, "That's right, Bosco, go inside and see what's happening." And it was Bosco who let the cat out of the bag. Instead of running into the bedroom, he ran around to the courtyard door that Pyle had bolted. There he began barking even more furiously. Hearing this new commotion, a mob pounded on one door and some huge beast slavering at the other. Mr. Ali thought more evil spirits had come to help their friend finish him off. His shrieks grew louder, adding still more volume to the noise. Pyle was both frightened and angry at Bosco for giving her away. Her mother saw where the dog was pointing and quickly unbolted the bathroom door. As it flew open, a perspiring, terrified, open-mouthed Mr. Ali came charging out. Right on his heels came the laundryman's donkey after him. The two ran straight for the garden at breakneck speed, trampling the plants, overturning flower pots. And on the donkey ran, quite sure that he could only escape from this madman by getting home to his village as quickly as possible. The servants caught up with Mr. Ali in the garden, where he had given up, being out of breath. It was a long, long time before they could convince him that everything was all right. They kept explaining that it was only the laundryman's donkey who'd been in the bathroom with him. But how could the animal have gotten there? Mr. Ali insisted that he must have come through the wall, since both the doors were locked. He remained quite convinced that it was an evil spirit in the form of a donkey that had attacked him in the bathroom. Inside the house, Mother was sorting things out with the children. She quickly understood who had done all the mischief, and for once her patience had reached its limit. You may be sure that Pyle got a spanking that she'll remember for as long as Mr. Ali will remember being attacked by an evil spirit. Word meanings: docile, ready to accept control or instruction. submissive, meccano, a type of building blocks. Idly, in an aimless or lazy way, stag, a male deer, rent, hare, toe, scurrying about, moving quickly or in haste, clogs, shoes with thick soles, wringing her hands, the nervous grasping or squeezing of the hands, slavering, drooling, trampling, treading on, crushing. The bangle sellers. Get set. Indian women are fond of wearing bangles. Apart from gold, bangles are also made from lac and glass. The poem you are going to read is based on bangles and was written by Sarojini Naidu, the famous freedom fighter and poet. She is known as the Nightingale of India. Bangle sellers are we who bear our shining loads to the temple fair. Who will buy these delicate, bright, rainbow-tinted circles of light? Lustrous tokens of radiant lives for happy daughters and happy wives. Some are meet for a maiden's wrist, silver and blue as the mountain mist. Some are flushed like the buds that dream on the tranquil brow of a woodland stream. Some are aglow with the bloom that cleaves to the limpid glory of newborn leaves. Some are like fields of sunlit corn, meet for a bride on her bridal morn. Some are like the flame of her marriage fire, or rich with the hue of her heart's desire, tinkling, luminous, tender and clear, like her bridal laughter and bridal tear. Some are purple and gold-flecked grey for she who has journeyed through life midway, whose hands have cherished, whose love has blessed, and cradled fair sons on her faithful breast, and serves her household in fruitful pride, and worships the gods at her husband's side. Word meanings: tinted, coloured slightly, lustrous, shiny, flushed, red, due to excitement or strong emotion, cleaves, splits or severs something, specially along a natural line or grain, limpid, completely clear and transparent, hue, a colour or shade, flecked, marked or dotted with small patches of colour. Arnab at college. Get set. How would you feel if you had to live away from home to study? Here is a story about Arnab, a poor student who has moved to a new city to study. This is his first time living away from home, and he is nervous and excited at the same time. Arnab talked about the whole situation with his mother. How could he study if he did not get a scholarship this time? His mother had never been to Kolkata, nor did she know anything about the special prestige given to the term college student. "Haven't you studied enough?" she asked. "No, Ma," Arnab replied, "but please don't worry about me. I will manage somehow even without a scholarship. So many poor students live in Kolkata. I'll just be one of them." The night before he was to leave, he could not sleep at all. His heart trembled. It felt tight inside his throat. Would he really be in Kolkata in less than 24 hours? Kolkata. He had heard so much about it. There were huge libraries where one could walk in and spend the whole day in the reading room. All night he lay in his bed. The thick branches of the tamarind tree behind the house made everything look darker. Why was it taking so long for dawn to break? Perhaps, he would not get to go to Kolkata. So many people died suddenly too. Oh God, please, don't let him die without seeing Kolkata, without studying in a college, at least for a few days. Please, please, God. He did not know anyone in the city, nor was he familiar with its streets. All he had was an address his friend Divey had given him a few months ago. It was the address of one of his uncles.
"All you have to do is mention my name. My uncle will look after you,"
Divey had said, and he had a street map of the city torn from an old railway timetable. Arnab kept both pieces of paper in his pocket. Before getting into the train, he had seen a big city before, but even so Kolkata surprised him. He came out of the Sialda railway station and stood staring at the flow of traffic on the road outside. What were those vehicles? Trams? And those speeding silently? They must be motor cars. There was something like a wheel attached to the ceiling of the station master's room, spinning with great speed. An electric fan, he guessed. Deve's uncle lived in a lane near Amherst Street. It was very difficult to find his house. With the help of his map, Arnab at least managed to find Harrison Road and the right house. Anil Babu, Deve's uncle, welcomed Arnab with great kindness and ordered a meal for him immediately. After his meal, Arnab went up to the roof and stretched out on the floor. It was now quite dark. He felt very tired. Nothing, however, could take away his excitement. He was finally in the city of his dreams. The house Anil Babu lived in was not his own. It was, in fact, a hostel where many other men lived. Arnab began going out from the next day to look for the job of a private tutor and to see which college would have him as a free student. Eventually he found Ripon College and thought it was the best college for him. The building was tall and large, which impressed Arnab. He completed the necessary forms and was admitted. Then he went in with another boy to inspect the classrooms. There were electric fans in each room. The other boys showed him where the switches were. Arnab spent a few enjoyable moments switching them on and off. He began going to college, but realized soon enough that staying in Anil Babu's hostel was going to be difficult. There was nowhere he could study. 3 other men shared his room. Arnab felt like he didn't belong there. He had never lived anywhere with so many adults. But what could he do? He had very little money, but he had promised his mother he would send her money when he got a scholarship. There was no chance of getting a scholarship now. What was he going to tell his mother? How was she going to manage? Things changed a little a month later. Anil Babu found Arnab a job. He would have to teach a young boy for 15 rupees a month. The money wasn't much, but something was better than nothing. About the same time he learned that the other boys in his college were sharing a room somewhere. They agreed to let Arnab live with them. Arnab went to live with them happily enough. At least he was now going to be with his new friends and could also manage some time to study. Word meanings: prestige, widespread respect and admiration felt for someone or something. Trembled, shook involuntarily, typically as a result of anxiety, excitement. Tram, a passenger vehicle powered by electricity, conveyed by overhead cables and running on rails laid in a public road. Anwar's Dal. Get set. Do you enjoy good food? Most of us have happy memories associated with the food we love and some dishes that we like more than others. Let's read a story about Anwar, a cook, who is famous for his dal. Samir was sitting in his father's food stall in a small street in Lucknow when he saw a man get off a horse at their door. 2 servants followed the man.
Looks rich. Is he coming here?
Samir wondered. Samir's father, Anwar Khan, looked up from the kebabs he was frying as one of the helpers came up and announced,
Nawab Hassan Ali has arrived.
The man entered and looked round their small shop.
I hear you are a famous cook, Anwar Khan,
he said in a bored voice.
I like tasting new dishes. What do you make the best? Dal,
said Samir's father, and went on frying the kebabs.
Dal? Just dal?
The Nawab asked, surprised.
I can make biryani and korma and all the usual dishes. But you asked me what I make the best.
Anwar said calmly.
But dal, that doesn't sound very exciting. My friends were praising your cooking so much. I expected some wonderful new dish. But you haven't tasted the dal I make. Fine, I'll taste it. I haven't got any ready now. What?
The Nawab said angrily.
I make my dal shahi urad only on order.
Anwar said.
I use a special masala. It takes a day to make. If your honor wishes, I'll make it for tomorrow's lunch.
Nawab Hasan Ali agreed unwillingly.
I live nearby. You can bring it to my house tomorrow. I am sorry, sir. That is not possible,
said Anwar. Samir sighed to himself. His father was being difficult as usual. His Abba Jan lost a lot of customers because he was such a fussy cook.
Huzur, to enjoy my dal, you will have to come to my shop. It has to be eaten fairly soon after it is cooked. So, Your Honor, once I call, you will have to come immediately. Really? What if I'm late? I'll throw the dal away or give it to the poor.
Anwar replied. Nawab Hasan Ali shook his head.
Ah, well.
He thought.
Let's taste his dal. Maybe it will be worth the trouble. Call me tomorrow, when you are ready,
he said and left the stall. Samir sighed with relief. He had been worried that the Nawab would lose his temper and leave. Samir knew that Nawabs often gave wonderful rewards to cooks if they liked a dish. His father had nearly spoilt everything. In the evening, Samir went with his father to the market to buy the ingredients for dal shahi urad. Only the best would do, of course. Each grain of urad dal had to be perfect. No broken bits. Cinnamon sticks, cardamom, coriander, cumin, cloves, garlic pods, onions, ginger and turmeric of the highest quality, saffron and milk for the fragrant ferni, crisp green mint leaves for the chutney. On the way home, Samir dreamt of the reward his father could get. He knew that his father's dal shahi urad was the best. Early next morning, Samir set to work with his father. He had a quick taste of the dal when his father wasn't looking. It tasted utterly delicious. It was the secret masala that made all the difference. When everything was ready, the dal was bubbling very gently in a small pot. Balls of dough moist and ready to be slapped into rotis, the raita cooling in an earthen bowl. Anwar turned to his son.
Go and call the Nawab. I am ready to serve lunch.
Samir ran all the way to the Nawab's palace. The Nawab was on the roof, flying kites with his friends. Samir went up to Hasan Ali and said timidly,
Nawab Sahab, the dal is ready. My father is calling you.
Hasan Ali looked down at Samir.
Who?
Then he seemed to remember.
Ah, yes, the dal.
One of his friends laughed.
Forget the dal, Hasan. Your kite is in danger. The green kite is about to cut it.
Hasan Ali hurriedly pulled at his kite.
Just you wait, green kite. I'll get you.
He shouted.
Nawab Sahab,
Samir said, worried about his father's temper.
Yes, yes.
Hasan Ali said, irritated.
Tell your father to wait. Can't you see my kite is in danger? But the dal...
Samir gave up and sadly walked away. All his dreams were fading away. He knew his father's temper. The moment Anwar heard that the Nawab preferred flying kites to tasting his dal, he would become very angry and throw away the dal. They could forget about the reward. Samir felt like crying. On reaching home, he looked up. The Nawab's kite was flying overhead, and his friend Aman was flying a kite from his rooftop across the lane. Suddenly, a wonderful idea struck Samir. He ran to Aman's rooftop.
Aman, do me a favor. See the blue and silver kite? Cut it fast. Sure, no problem,
said Aman, grinning. He was a champion at kite flying. He made a special kite string with a layer of ground glass that could cut through anything. Samir raced back to the Nawab's house. He ran up the stairs and reached the roof, just as Aman had positioned his kite directly above the Nawab's. Aman gave a sharp tug.
Oh no!
Hasan Ali groaned in dismay as his kite drifted down towards the ground.
Nawab Sahab,
Samir said.
The food is waiting. The dal is delicious. Oh, yes, yes.
The Nawab suddenly remembered the special dal.
Now the kite's gone. Let's go and eat.
The Nawab and his friends entered the stall and sat down on the carpet. Anwar came in with the dal and Samir followed with hot rotis dripping with butter. Samir held his breath as Nawab Hassan broke a piece of roti, dipped it in the dal shahi urad, and put it into his mouth, chewed slowly and then closed his eyes.
Ah,
He said softly. Samir let go of his breath. The Nawab dipped a second piece of roti in the dal, scooped some raita with it, savoured it and said,
Anwar, your dal shahi urad is truly heavenly. I have never tasted anything better. You deserve a reward. Tell me, what would you like?
For the first time that day, Anwar Khan smiled.
I would like to have a bigger food stall, Huzur, near the mosque.
Said Hassan Ali.
Now give me some more of your dal shahi urad and a roti.
Watching his father serve the Nawab and his guests. Samir grinned to himself. Now they would be rich. Later, he would tell his father how he tricked the Nawab into coming on time. He knew his father would laugh and give him some money. With it, he and Aman could buy kites and tops in the market and treat themselves to some sweets. As Nawab Hassan Ali ate and ate, Samir smiled and smiled. Word meanings: bored, tired and impatient because you do not think something is interesting. Difficult, someone who never seems pleased or satisfied and is hard to deal with. Crisp, food that is pleasantly hard or firm when you bite it. Timidly, without having courage or confidence. Grinning, smiling widely. Tug, pull, something hard or suddenly. Savoured, taste, good food or drink, and enjoy it to the full. 9 gold medals. Get set. Special Olympics is the world's largest sports organization for children and adults with intellectual disabilities, providing year-round training and competitions to more than 4.5 million athletes in 170 countries. Here is a poem about a race in the Special Olympics. The athletes had come from all over the country to run for the gold, for the silver and bronze. Many weeks and months of training, all coming down to these games. The spectators gathered around the old field to cheer on all the young women and men. The final event of the day was approaching. Excitement grew high to begin. The blocks were all lined up for those who would use them, the 100-yard dash and the race to the run. These were 9 resolved athletes in back of the starting line, poised for the sound of the gun. The signal was given, the pistol exploded, and so did the runners all charging ahead. But the smallest among them, he stumbled and staggered and fell to the asphalt instead. He gave out a cry in frustration and anguish, his dreams and his efforts all dashed in the dirt. But as sure as I'm standing here telling the story, the same goes for what next occurred. The 8 other runners pulled up on their heels, the ones who had trained for so long to compete. One by one they all turned around and went back to help him, and brought the young boy to his feet. Then all the 9 runners joined hands and continued, the 100-yard dash now reduced to a walk, and a banner above that said, Special Olympics could not have been more on the mark. That's how the race ended, with 9 gold medals. They came to the finish line holding hands still, and the standing ovation and 9 beaming faces said more than these words ever will. Word meanings: resolved, someone who has made up his mind, determined, poised, ready, prepared, charging ahead, running ahead, asphalt. Material used to pave roads. Standing ovation, clapping while standing to show support or respect. Rowling's story. Get set. Have you read the Harry Potter books? These are some of the most popular books among readers of all ages. Let's read about J.K. Rowling, the author of these books, and see how she came to write them. "I can't wait! I can't wait!" exclaims 9-year-old Anita, hugging herself in expectation. She is in front of a line of hundreds of excited children outside a bookstore, waiting impatiently for the launch of the latest Harry Potter book. Children in more than 30 countries are crazy about Harry Potter, their bespectacled hero who discovers on his 11th birthday that he is a wizard. J.K. Rowling, Harry's creator, has so enchanted children with her imagination and with vivid characters like Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley that her 7 books have remained on top of bestsellers lists for years. In this age when most children are not very interested in reading, Joanne Kathleen Rowling has turned children on to reading more than any other living author. In spite of her success with the Harry Potter series of books, films, and a range of Harry Potter merchandise, J.K. Rowling is a shy, soft-spoken person, a writer from the age of 6. It was when she was travelling to London on a crowded train that the idea for Harry Potter simply fell into her head. J.K. Rowling says, "I didn't have a pen with me, and I was too shy to ask anybody if I could borrow one. I think now that this was probably a good thing, because I simply sat and thought for 4 hours, and all the details bubbled up in my brain. And this scrawny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who didn't know he was a wizard became more and more real to me. I think that perhaps if I had to slow down the ideas to capture them on paper, I might have stifled some of them. Although sometimes I do wonder how much of what I imagined on that journey I had forgotten by the time I actually got my hands on a pen." Rowling spent the next 5 years constructing the plots of 7 books, one for every year of Harry's secondary school life. At first, nobody wanted to publish Harry Potter. She was told that the plot was too complex. She refused to give up and at last found a publisher, Bloomsbury. By refusing to give up and at last finding a publisher, her life was turned upside down. Her success had journalists and fans knocking on her door day and night. At last, tired of the constant attention, she kept away from people so that she could concentrate on her next 4 books. "Magic has a universal appeal," says she. "Although I don't believe in magic the way I describe in my books, I'd love it to be real. The starting point for the whole Harry's world is, what if it was real? And I work from there." As she struggled to finish her first book, she would often write in restaurants where she and her daughter could stay warm while she wrote. She agrees that she is like Harry, who is full of fears and anxieties, but gets on by luck and courage. "Harry has the will to get through," she explains, "and like him, I never lost that. When you are really in trouble, you don't sit there and cry. You try and get out of it." One person who is not there to share her success is her mother, who died in 1990, before the first Harry Potter book was published. "Books were my mother's passion. Having a daughter who was a writer would have made her very happy, even if I'd only sold 3 copies, says Rowling. She sold a lot more than that. Her last 4 books broke records as the fastest-selling books of all time. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows sold 11 million copies on the first day of release in the United Kingdom and the United States. The best part of the success, according to the author, is that it stops her from worrying about the future. Not a day goes by when I am not thankful for that, she says. While others try to fathom Rowling's success, Anita knows why the magic works. Because it's exciting, she says. Word meanings: bespectacled, wearing spectacles; scrawny, very thin, weak-looking; stifled, prevent something from happening; complex, difficult to understand. Anxieties, things that worry. If. Get set. Rudyard Kipling's If is perhaps his most famous poem. Kipling composed the poem in 1909 while living in Great Britain. It was first published in 1910 in Kipling's collection.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good, not talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breath a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and never a sinew, to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Word meanings: triumph, victory, disaster, an event that causes great damage. Knaves, an old-fashioned word for dishonest men. Build them up. Build them up. Rebuild the broken parts of your life. Sinew, a part of your body that connects a muscle to a bone. In a literary meaning, something that gives strength or support. The soldier and the boy. Get set. Have you ever experienced a natural disaster? Do you know that there are parts of the world that regularly face floods due to heavy rain? Let's read a story of a soldier who tries to help a small boy by evacuating him from a flood-struck area. The young soldier pushed his oars into the rough waters. Rain hit his face, soaking his dirty uniform. He struggled against the current that sucked him continuously towards the river. He moved the boat past the huts, which had gone under the water. His eyes watched the swirling current. A dark object came floating down towards the boat. The young soldier felt sick. He turned his face away.
The village is gone,
he said to the older soldier.
There is not a single living soul left. The flood has taken too many lives this year.
The young soldier continued softly.
I'm glad my family is safe at home. Himachal Pradesh, you know. Winters are bad there. The cold has even taken a few lives over the last few years. But it's not like this. This is hell. Look here. Let's get back.
The other man interrupted him impatiently.
There is nothing more we can do here. Whatever the army could do has been done. The villagers are getting their rice and dal, and here I am half-starved. Shh!
The young soldier said, suddenly.
Do you hear that?
They fell silent. A small whimper could be heard.
It's from the neem tree. Maybe it's a cat. Come on. Let's try and get her down. Raising his voice, he called out. Come, Kitty. Kitty, come down. Little cat.
The young man shaded his eyes against the rain and looked up at the tree. It was not a cat, but a boy who was seated on a branch like a frightened bird. When he met the soldier's eyes, his small body tensed. Then he looked away, silently. The older soldier looked up.
What's that boy doing there? I thought they'd all been evacuated from the village.
Lifting himself up, he shouted,
What are you doing up there, beta? You should have been with the others. Come, we'll take you to the camp.
The boy didn't answer. He didn't move. The young man gestured to his comrade to sit down. Setting the oars over his knees, he said to the boy,
You must be hungry. Very, very hungry, aren't you?
The boy swallowed dryly, looking down at his knees. He was crying.
If you come down,
said the young soldier gently.
We'll take you to the relief camp.
There was no answer.
What's wrong with him?
Grumbled the other man.
Why isn't he coming down? He will.
The young soldier whispered. Facing the boy once more, he said smilingly,
All the people of the village are at the camp. Don't you want to go back with your father, your mother, your friends?
The boy's face turned pale. His eyes grew large and troubled. Then he spoke.
My father and my mother are dead. They drowned over there.
He pointed to a bamboo stick rising from the fast-moving waters.
They are all dead.
Then his face froze into a mask of determination.
I'm not going to the camp. I'm staying here. I'm not leaving. I'm waiting,
said the boy.
Waiting?
The young soldier shook his head.
What for? The boy bit his lip. For Prashant Bhaiya. He'll be coming to find me. My father told me. He said, Don't you worry, Mohit beta. Prashant Bhaiya will come and get you. He'll come with soldiers, with jeeps and trucks and helicopters. He'll rescue us. You'll see.
The boy wiped his face on his arm.
He will come.
He whispered.
Though I don't know what he looks like.
He continued.
But that doesn't matter. He will recognize me. Look.
He held up a rusty medal.
Here, look, Prashant Bhaiya gave me this 5 years ago, before he left to join the army.
The young soldier stared at the boy in amazement. He reached back, gripped the older soldier's arm, and began to shake it.
Hey, look at this. Look at the medal. It's mine, you see. What are you saying?
The other man said.
You haven't been here before. You told me just a little while ago that you are from the hills.
The young soldier interrupted him and cried.
That's my brother. That's Mohit, my brother. What's wrong with you?
The older man eyed his friend with suspicion.
Oh, shut up,
whispered the young man.
Don't you understand what I'm trying to do?
He rose to his feet, setting the boat rocking. He lifted his arms and cried.
Mohit, I thought I would never find you. Come down here quickly. I am Prashant, your elder brother.
The boy froze. Slowly, the expression of disbelief changed to one of hope.
Prashant Bhaiya, I knew you would come. I knew you wouldn't forget me. Of course not,
said the young soldier gently.
Of course not, beta. Come down now. I'll take care of you. I promise.
Word meanings. Swirling, moving in a twisting or spiraling pattern. Whimper, a series of low, feeble sounds, expressive of fear, pain, or unhappiness. Evacuated, removed someone from a place of danger to a safer place. The sacrifice. Get set. Religious books like the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita tell us stories about characters who live and die for keeping their word. They are not concerned about the pain or sorrow that it brings to them. We should treat them as role models and apply their teachings to our daily lives. Let's read one such story of sacrifice from the Mahabharata. The 5 young Pandavas, Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula and Sahadeva, lived at the royal palace in Hastinapura, along with their cousins, the Kauravas. Dronacharya, who was an expert in warfare and the use of arms, was appointed to train the young men as warriors. Drona proved to be an excellent teacher and helped them in becoming excellent fighters. Bhima and his cousin Duryodhana could wield the mace with strength and skill. Yudhishthira could attack his enemies from a moving chariot. And the twins Nakula and Sahadeva were superb swordsmen. But of Drona's pupils, Arjuna was the best. He was also his favorite pupil. Arjuna could fight with a mace, a sword, a lance, or any other weapon. But the weapon he used best was a bow and arrow. He was such a skilled archer that no one could match him, no matter how difficult the target. His arrow would find it. Drona promised Arjuna that he would be the best archer in the world. One day, Drona took his pupils into the forest to teach them how to hunt. As they entered the forest, they saw many signs that indicated that they were not alone. There were arrows stuck on the trees as if someone had been practicing archery. One of their dogs ran forward, barking loudly. Then swiftly through the air came 7 shining arrows straight towards the dogs. Drona could see that they came from a great distance, with only the sound of the dogs barking to guide them to the royal party. They were the arrows of a true warrior. The sight surprised Drona greatly. He had always believed that there was no one as skilled in archery as his pupils. He wondered who the unknown archer could be. So Drona and his pupils set off in search of the person who could have shot the arrows. They found a young man in a clearing in the forest. He was deep in prayer, but his bow and arrows lay beside him. In front of him was an image of their teacher, Dronacharya. Soon the young man finished his prayers and opened his eyes. At the sight of Dronacharya, his face lit up, and he bowed low before him.
"Who are you?"
asked Drona.
"I am the son of Hiranyadhanu, king of the foresters." "And who is your teacher? How proud he must be of such a skilled pupil!"
exclaimed Drona.
"Master, you are my teacher. Years ago, I came to you to learn the use of weapons. You turned me away saying that you would not teach me as I was not a Kshatriya. But my desire to make you my teacher was so great that I made a clay image of you here in the forest, and since then I have practiced with my bow and arrow, single-mindedly and with great concentration." "A clay image?"
Drona whispered, and suddenly he remembered the youth he had once turned away. As he stood there with the kneeling boy before him, troubled feelings of envy and fear began to arise in Drona's heart, though he allowed no sign of them to show upon his face. He spoke with a smile.
"I have come before you in person, Eklavya. As your teacher, I want to test your skill. Let there be a contest, here and now, so that your skill can be matched with that of the princes of Hastinapur, who are also my pupils."
Nothing could have made Ekalavya happier. Joyously he agreed to Drona's suggestion. The contest started. All those who had learned from Drona came forward to shoot their arrows at targets named by Drona. But of all of them, Ekalavya was easily the best. And there was no one, not even Arjuna, who could beat him. One by one they retired, defeated by him. Filled with shame and jealousy, Drona looked at the royal pupils, whom he had trained with such care. He could not bear the thought that this boy, whom he had turned away and refused to teach, had proved their superior. Drona felt bitterly disappointed, but he swallowed his feelings and smiled at the boy.
"Indeed, you have done an excellent job,"
said Drona.
You have learnt all your skills from me,
As you say, and it appears that I have taught you well. You must also be aware that it is the custom for a pupil to pay his teacher. If I were to ask you for something in return for having taught you, would you give me what I ask?
Said Drona.
Willingly and with great pleasure,
Said the young man.
Are you sure you will give me what I want?
Asked Drona.
Master, I shall give you whatever you ask for.
He said, proud and delighted to be regarded as the pupil of the teacher he had admired all his life.
Then give me the thumb from your right hand,
Commanded Drona. The boy started slightly. Drona wished to maim him so that he could never draw his bow again as well as he did. With Ekalavya maimed, Arjuna would have no rival. Ekalavya understood this, but he smiled gently. He drew out his knife, and with one stroke he cut off his right thumb and offered it to Drona. Ekalavya's story is a sad one. It is the story of a great wrong done to one who was noble and brave. But the Mahabharata tells us of people who have the strengths and weaknesses of real people. For there is no one in the world who is completely good or completely evil. To continue the story, the princes of Hastinapura returned to their city with Drona, while Ekalavya turned back quietly to the forest glades where he lived. Because of Ekalavya's great sacrifice, Arjuna remained the best archer in the world. Word meanings: wield, hold and use a weapon. Mace, a heavy club with a spiked metal head. Lance, a long weapon with a wooden shaft and a pointed steel head. Kshatriya, a member of the military caste, the second of the 4 great Hindu castes. Single-mindedly, with only one purpose or goal. Started, jerked or jumped as from a shock of surprise. Maim, injure specially with the loss of a part of the body. Rival, a person who is competing for the same object. Glades, open spaces in a forest. The ghost. Get set. Do you like watching horror movies or reading scary stories? Though we know that ghosts do not exist, still we get afraid of them at times. Let's read a poem in which the poet has depicted the characteristics of ghosts in a very interesting manner. The good thing about good people is that they are transparent. The bad thing about ghosts is they are transparent. In fact, the way you see through them, you don't see them at all. And when you can see a ghost, it isn't quite a ball. In fact, you are up against a transparent vapor wall. A few things it were best to know about ghosts. They are bad hosts, for they are never in station, and worse guests. They barge in invitation or no invitation. Ghosts are not bad omens. They don't bring doom. They don't come in through chimneys. They don't ride a broom. But ghost stories can be true. I could tell you a few. Old hotels where stairs creak and where door things squeak are full of stories that eerily speak of ghosts and churales. I've heard it tell, a lady ghost bathing in a Missouri hotel. Every night you heard water running and the clink of bangles on her unseen hand. But going to the bathroom, you'd see the floor quite dry and silence draped on the towel stand. Once a forest guard saw 1/5 of his face, the ghost's face. He only saw eyebrows and goatee. Another saw no legs, but sailing by he saw a dhoti. And in a village birds would suddenly stop their morning bicker and their morning twitter. They had sensed a ghost there rummaging in the litter. But let's end these stories, for ghosts give me the jitters. Word meanings: barge in, enter uninvited. Omens, signs of what will happen in the future. Doom, something bad that is going to happen. Creak, make a scraping or squeaking sound. Eerily, something done in a creepy or unnatural manner. bicker, argue.